Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. We believe that God is doing wonderful things through us, and so this is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck. I'm pleased to be your host, and on the program with me today we have two guests, both from Glade Run Lutheran Services in Zelienople, Pennsylvania. Pastor Margareta Galbraith-Cordes serves as Director of Spiritual Care for the children and the staff there at Glade Run. And Brandon McCormick serves as a mental health specialist and deals very directly with the children. Welcome to the program today, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
For the benefit of our viewers who may be unfamiliar, could you simply give us a little background about Glade Run Lutheran Services and a little bit about the history of the place?
Sure. It started over 150 years ago, and it started as an orphanage. And William Passavant, who was the pastor who was born in Zelienople, started it. He saw a need where there were children who didn't have families who could care for them. And so he began the farm and orphan school, I believe it was, and took care of children. It's evolved over the years, and now we have a residential treatment facility, 2 group homes, and we have a large school on campus. We have horses and other animals, a horticulture program, so that all the children can receive care and therapy in many different ways. We also have a number of day students who come to the school each day, close to, I want to say definitely over 100, 150 in that range. So it's an exciting place. It's very lively, and it's an exciting place to do ministry.
Tell us a little bit about how do the children come to be in the care of the staff at Glade Run. Some come from some very unfortunate situations and do need a lot of care. Could you say a little bit about the children and young people who are with you?
Sure, I'll start, and then maybe Brandon has a few words too, as he works with the children directly. Some come to us because they literally do not have families. Some have been adopted. They may have come from other countries, and sometimes adoptions don't work out so well, and they come to us either to help to work out the relationship with the family, and sometimes they go home successfully, but sometimes also while they're with us, those relationships are ended, and then there's a search for a new family to take that place. Others are with their biological families and struggle with depression or some other mental health issues, and they come to us to be stabilized and receive care and then hopefully return home to their families.
How important it is that we do care for our children, and what a wonderful ministry for such a very, very long time, dating back to the time of Dr. William Passavant, as you mentioned. It's wonderful. Wonderful. And of course, as you said, the place has changed quite a bit. It's a very different place than it once was, although in some ways still the same. There's still horses and sort of a farm atmosphere a little bit there. Each of you work there in somewhat different capacities. Could each of you say a few words about what it is that you do there?
I'm the Director of Spiritual Care, so I work specifically in terms of the spiritual life with the children and give also support to staff. We have worship every Sunday in Sunday school. We have a choir that sings, and then I work with Sister Mildred McCracken. She's one of our Lutheran deaconesses, and we offer spiritual groups in all of the cottages on our campus, and then we do a lot of individual visits and give spiritual guidance and support to the young people who live with us, as well as to some of the students who are at the school.
As a direct care staff, I work directly with the children day in, day out. We are the ones who wake them up in the morning, who help them get their meds, help them get, with their clothing, getting dressed, making sure their meals. We're there for dealing with structure, making sure that they do their homework. We do those teachable moments throughout the day. The therapists and the doctor deal with the specifics of medication management, and the therapists deal with, a couple hours a week with specific issues. But we deal with the day-to-day, moment-to-moment anger outbursts and sadness and depression and all the feelings they have, and help teach them in the moment what they're feeling, how they're feeling it, how to get through it, and how to survive, and keep them safe at the same time. So we're there for all those things. We're the chauffeurs, we're the ones who put the Band-Aids on. We're not parents, but we have a lot of the same responsibilities in lieu of a parent until such time as the child goes home.
And about how old are the children who are there at Glade Run?
We've ranged from 6 to 18. Our lowest age has come up recently, population-wise, has changed. Our youngest is around 8 now.
And then we just added a new cottage that's called a transitional unit. So just very recently now we've extended our age to age 21 for boys at this time, young men.
A very, very important ministry, indeed. And specifically here today, the two of you are here to talk about something that's come about very recently, a form of prayer that has become more popular in recent years and in many places is prayer with movement in the midst of a labyrinth. Could you say some things about the new Labyrinth at Glade Run?
Well, I will say that approximately 8.5 years ago, I started there a little over 9, but I started doing labyrinths with the children. We started them in leaves, and the kids would run through them and play with them. And the diaconal members started noticing that, and a few of them had seen labyrinths other places, and it started a conversation among us. And I started joining them for diaconal dinners on Wednesdays. We grew to the point where we started discussing, well, we want one. We need one. And it started slow. It built. We had conversations about what would be safe and what would we need and where would we put it. And the ball rolled very slowly for many years. And then all of a sudden, at the beginning of last year, the ball picked up speed. And suddenly there were bricks and there were volunteers and there was dirt flying. And so by the end of the spring, we'd had an actual labyrinth on our lands.
Could you say a little more about what exactly a labyrinth is? For those who may be unfamiliar, it's prayer with movement.
That's what it is now. I probably should start with a little bit of history of labyrinths. A labyrinth is different than a maze. It has one path instead of a maze where you wander through and get confused. The labyrinth is the opposite. There's no way to get lost. Labyrinths have been around as a symbol used in storytelling and in dancing and a few other things for around 5,000 years. The oldest ones we know of are in Greece and other parts of Europe, but they exist in almost every continent, in almost every culture over time, from the Vikings to the ancient Irish. They exist in India, they exist in Native America, totally across the world. There's one author who said that because the labyrinth is everywhere, it is almost like it is the thumbprint of the Creator. It is God's thumbprint everywhere. And if you actually look at this labyrinth, you can kind of see why they get the idea of it being kind of like a thumbprint. This is 2 labyrinths stuck together, but if you look at your own thumb, you can see the fact that the ridges are very similar. This specifically is a circular version of what's called a Cretan or classical labyrinth, which is very simple. It just goes back and forth and back and forth. But as this spread across the world and ended up in many places, it was used to tell stories and such. But the most oldest story that most people know about is that of Theseus and the Minotaur. It's a Greek story of somebody having to go into the center of this place and defeat a monster. As the Christian church gained momentum, by around the year 1000, those old Greek stories were coming back in, along with the other Greek writers. And that story became kind of important, because it was a special man defeated a great evil. And so that same idea was applied to the idea of the labyrinth. They started drawing them on the inside of the entryway to churches. And it would be the story of Theseus. And they actually should have Theseus and the Minotaur in the center of the labyrinth. But next to it would be the description of how Christ defeated sin.
And this is sort of meant to meant to replicate that in some ways,
Oh,
this
the
prayer
allegory
journey.
grew. Well, the allegory grew, and they began placing them on the floors instead. And the ones on the floors of the cathedrals are amazing. They're huge. They're beautiful. They're inlaid. And one of the changes that was made as the labyrinth became integral to medieval Christianity was that it was divided differently. Instead of just being a back and forth, it was made to be divided like a cross.
Oh, interesting. We're going to get, we'd like a better shot of that, and we're going to also take a quick break and more about the history of the labyrinth and how it has been a very important thing in the history of Christian thought and prayer right after we take this break. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We welcome you back, and we welcome back Pastor Margareta Galbraith-Cordes and Brandon McCormick from Glade Run Lutheran Services Ministry to Children, and specifically the Prayer Labyrinth, which has come about somewhat recently, but has a long history. And Brandon, you were telling us a little bit before the break about the history of the Prayer Labyrinth and how it came to be.
Well, the labyrinths in the churches were a huge symbol for the people about the shape of the cosmos, because for them the world was circular, the heavens were circular, and there was layers of them, the different spheres of the different planets, and heaven being the most outside. So for a while the labyrinth was actually, the center was the equivalent of the earthly world and sin, and over time slowly that was flipped, and it came to mean that the center became the holy place. It became Jerusalem. It became the goal instead of the thing to escape from. And that flip was a big change in thought over time. Now the thing is, the labyrinths started being forgotten, and they started being lost. A lot of them were dug up. A lot of them were destroyed. Many of them because children played on them. We have numerous records in churches of the fact that the priests began to be annoyed by all the noise the children made during services. And so they had their labyrinths ripped up or covered over to keep the children from making all the noise. We later on actually kind of encourage our kids to play on the labyrinth at times and to differentiate the two, because there's that joyful play and then there's the calm and quiet, and they can happen in the same place. The labyrinth was kind of lost. Not really, but it became obscure for many years until I think around 30 years ago, a woman named Lauren Artress ended up walking the one in Chartres Cathedral in France and realized it was an amazing thing, and the connection she felt and the presence of God she felt when she walked it was just amazing to her. So she began to search and look, and built one back home and started experiencing the labyrinth in many ways. She wrote a book called Walking a Sacred Path, which is her initial description of her discovery of what the labyrinth was like and how she started to spread it. She actually founded an entire organization called Veritas, which trains people to facilitate labyrinth walking, which I'll explain how to walk a labyrinth a little bit later. But that resurgence of labyrinths spread. They began to appear in churches all over the world, and in gardens, in hospitals. There are studies now being done in different hospitals and other places about how labyrinths assist in healing, whether it's the placebo effect or whether it's just positive state of mind, or to some people, the ones who walk with faith, whether it's the fact that they're letting themselves be touched by God. And it seems there is an increased sense of well-being for those people. When I first brought the labyrinth to people at Glade Run, one of the phrases I used was devotion in motion, because too often we're taught to pray, mostly as children, to sit still, not fidget, put your hands together, don't move, and then pray. And the fact that for many of our children, that's impossible. The ability to sit still is denied them. And the ability to reach out and have that connection in a motion, in a physical, kinesthetic way, and still be able to reach out to God, to whether it's dancing or walking quietly and listening, all those things, they still allow their body to move and they're not distracted by their own self. Only slightly rambling, but one of the things for our Labyrinth in original thought as well, in my original proposal, was the fact that many of our children being victims of trauma, where the role of parent was twisted and there was neglect, there was abuse. For many of them as well, faith and religion was twisted and was part of the abuse as well. And with the Labyrinth, there is none of the outward trappings of religion which would disturb or turn that person away. Because if the things they see are the same as that which was used to hurt them, they're not going to come any closer. But a Labyrinth is very non-denominational. It's very non-sectarian. It spreads across the world. So it gives them a chance to get that taste, to get that feel of what it's like to just let go and let God for a little bit without having things that resemble the original trauma back on them again.
It's interesting, too, that when you speak about children's inability to sit still, we think sometimes that sitting still is the only way that we can focus on God in any kind of prayer time or spiritual life. But that here's a way that, as it's interesting to hear you call it devotion in motion, that is actually designed to help one focus while in the midst of movement, is an interesting thing. And if we're trying to care for children spiritually, and the spiritual care of children is so incredibly important, how do you see this as an important tool in the spiritual care of the children there at Glade Run?
Well, one of the things, I've walked it with some of our children and teenagers, and things they've said after walking it is they've sensed God's presence in a very powerful way, and they had some insights that they felt God has given them. I always encourage them to think of a question as they go in and to ponder that and listen for God if God says something back in response to their question. So some of them said they had certain insights that they felt God was speaking to them. And many of them say it's very calming, and I find it that way. It's a very peaceful way to do a prayer walk.
Again, you're at a place where you want to keep children safe, and you want to care for them physically. Make sure that they're physically safe. They still do their homework, so their minds are stimulated. Emotionally, you try to care for them, and also spiritually, to care for the children, to really care for the whole person is so very important. And whether it's in a chapel service or singing some camp songs or doing a service project or walking a labyrinth, it's all part of caring for the children there who are in need and are in some ways hurting very much, but yet are in the midst of the healing process. Thanks again for what you've shared so far. We're going to take just another short break and back with more on Lutherans Alive. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. From Glade Run Lutheran Services in Zelienople, we're talking with Pastor Margareta Galbraith-Cordes and Brandon McCormick. And certainly an important ministry to the children there at Glade Run, but also It's bigger than that. It's also caring for the children's families, and also even branching out to the community. Could you say a few words about that and how others are also involved, even in something like the Prayer Labyrinth?
Sure. One of the gifts that we've had, that in addition to the children at Glade Run and some of the staff who have worked on it, is that we've had some people in the community right around Glade Run and the general area who've been part of that. We had the English Lutheran Church in Zelienople and Passivant Retirement Center and New Hope Lutheran Church involved actively, both by supporting funds as well as having people who've helped us build it. And so as we build it, we've actually thought about the community in Zelienople and the wider community and inviting others to join us in walking the labyrinth. And we've built the labyrinth wide enough so that people who are in wheelchairs at Passivant, our neighbor, could come over and also enjoy the labyrinth and be part of walking and or driving in that sense through the labyrinth.
The children spend a lot of time themselves. The day we actually broke ground, the children, the week before, the children that I work with directly came and helped me lay out the paint to draw the shape. The day we broke ground, you had directors, you had people from foundation, you had people from finance, you had spiritual care, all working together, everybody working together to dig and start laying. And then as the adults began to fade away and the volunteers began to fade away, the children started coming in. And over the next month and a half or so, every cottage on campus came and spent some time laying bricks or digging ditches or helping or any number of things involved, laying sand, putting grass back. And then my children alone, the youngest boys that I work with in McCoy Cottage, wanted to make sure that I told how much work they put into it, because they put in almost more hours than anybody but me, themselves. And the fact that they would spend hours carrying bricks and digging and carrying sand and earth and working together, which is pretty much a record. The ability to spend that much time working positively and friendly with each other is a struggle for them. And they were able to do that for such a long time.
Working at a place like Glade Run, I would imagine, would be both very challenging, but yet at the same time very rewarding. I was wondering if each of you could say something about what the work has meant to you in your own life, in your own faith journey, whether it's your work in general there at Glade Run or specifically the work on the Labyrinth. What's it all meant to you?
Well, for me, I've been there a little over 9 years now at Glade Run. Yes, it is sometimes very challenging because the residents we work with have faced a lot of trauma in their lives, and so carry a lot of pain, reenact some pain, just struggle through a lot of pain. But the beauty of it is to journey with them and hopefully bring Christ into their lives or renew that sense of Christ in their lives and to give them hope and then to journey with them towards healing. And it's really wonderful to see. It's sort of the Good Friday Easter journey, that to meet them in the place of darkness, the valley of shadow and death, and then to walk with them to green pastures and still waters, to new life and new beginnings and new hope. And that is very, very meaningful and powerful and a real joy.
I know that for me, again, I've been there a little over 9 years as well. The struggles and pain of the children and the trauma they've been through, knowing their stories, is painful. And then having them enact their own pain back at the staff and lashing out at us over the years teaches one humility and patience beyond what you think you would have. I explained once to Dr. Lockwood, our director, that one of the things it takes to be somebody who works directly with the children is somebody who can spend part of the day literally getting spat in the face and still tuck that child in at night. You know, being able to do that, you know, and finding out that I'm one of those people who can do that and have done it for 9 years, it definitely tells me that there's something I'm doing right. and very humbling.
I would think it would take very special gifts to be able to minister in that place. And as I myself have had the chance to be there on a number of occasions, I've seen that in action. I can see that it is a wonderful place, and a wonderful place that can help our children, and God is definitely powerfully at work there. And it's neat to see another wonderful resource like the Labyrinth be used in the spiritual care and enrichment of the children, so that they can connect with God, so that they can know the love of Christ, so that Christ can be brought to them, as you say, in a unique way, in a way that can really speak to them. And as you say, you've seen it happen. You've seen God make a difference there in the lives of the young people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a wonderful tool for spiritual formation. It really is.
Thank you so much for what you've shared here today. And thank you so much for being with us on Lutherans Alive. From wherever you're watching, we know that there is a Lutheran congregation that would be very pleased to welcome you. Won't you come and worship with us? And won't you come and join us next time on Lutherans Alive?